Okay, another tier list. We're going to be doing Claymores. Last time we did polearms, today we're doing Claymores. And I gotta be honest, Hoyoverse needs to show Claymores a little more love, because these characters are not used as often as the others. I'll tell you that. But let's dig in. First, a little dog boy, Razor. Okay, Razor is interesting. The only time he is being used in current day and age is on a team coined by Zajef by the name of Thundering Fury, which is fitting. And it's actually pretty good, because what's happening there is his burst doesn't infuse him with Electro, it adds Electro on top of his normal attacks. So his normal attacks are doing physical damage. His Guardian Wolf is doing Electro damage in addition to that. So any character or ability that infuses your main character's attacks with a different element is going to work on Razor, but he's also going to be adding Electro to that at the same time. So, notably, Bennett's C6 with his burst. If Razor is inside it, his normal attacks are doing pyro damage, his Wolf is doing Electro damage at the same time. So, if you pair them both with a Hydro, Dendro, that means you're triggering every reaction that can possibly be triggered with all four of those elements, and they all work very well together, right? The Hydro and the Dendro are creating bloom cores. The Pyro afterwards triggers the burning. The Electro might take its place and trigger a Hyper Bloom. The Pyro and the Electro will trigger Overloaded. The Pyro and the Hydro are going to trigger Vapes. The Hydro and Electro Charge. So on and so forth. I missed a couple. But they're all reacting as one all the time. So there's a ton of numbers on the screen. And if you build Razor with full EM, it's a pretty good team. It's definitely useful. And if you actually put Thundering Fury on him, you can trigger his skill during his burst a handful of times. It maxes out the cooldown reduction very easily because he's triggering so many reactions. So aside from that though, Razor's pretty useless. Right? His numbers are low. Call a spade. He's pretty underwhelming even at C6. And are there better options? Yes. Are there worse options? Yeah. But with that being said, that usually lands people in B, and we'll keep that trend going. Next, Gaming. Gaming has pretty much trailblazed the whole plunge meta. Right? They introduced plunging mechanics into his kit explicitly, and around the same time, release the character that increases plunge attack damage, Chongyun. So needless to say, they work very well together. But Gaming on his own, his damage is okay up until C6, then his damage is better than okay. It's good. It's a good amount of damage, but you need C6. And that's a bummer for a 4-star specifically, because there's absolutely no guarantee that you're going to get constellations when you pull for them, even if they're on banner. So if there's a banner with Gaming, Yunjin, and Candace as the 4-stars, you can spend 150 wishes on them, and there's no guarantee that you'll even get one Gaming. So do with that information what you will. But with that being said, he's still alright, but alright lands you next to Razor, unfortunately. Diluc! Plunge Daddy, as they say. I don't. They do. Diluc is interesting. He's fun. He's fun to play. He was a really early character. One of the first 5-stars. Maybe the first, I don't know. But I like his skill and how you could trigger it 3 times. You can weave a couple of normal attacks in between them. It's pretty cool. Right now, there are really 2 teams that work with him. Him and Xinyan for Plunge, or him and Chevreuse for Overloaded. Both of which are pretty good. Diluc has the highest plunge multipliers in the game, so using him as a plunge obviously plays to his strengths, which I'm not even sure were intended by Hoyoverse, because every other Claymore has just about the same multiplier, except for him. It's just him. It's just a little higher. And the Overloaded teams are also pretty good, but the problem with that is, as always with Overloaded, if you're facing small enemies, they're going to bounce around a lot, and Diluc's burst pushes people away on top of that. So you're going to do a lot of chasing, and you can't really even have a grouper, because if you introduce Kazuha or Sucrose or anything like that, you've ruined half of Chevreuse's utility. So there's a couple of limitations there. But overall, there are 2 playstyles for him, and I assume they're going to continue to grow. Right? Mawika's coming out soon. I think she's going to be good for Pyro characters, so I assume Diluc is going to get a little bit of a buff with her release. I at least hope so, because he's a cool fucking character, man. He's smooth, he's charismatic, he makes wine. He's got a minx coat. He's an A, if not for style alone. Beidou! I like Beidou. I think she's cool. She's a fucking pirate with a pseudo eye patch, not a real one, but a cloth, an eye cloth, which matches her outfit. I would assume if you need an eye patch, you use it out of necessity, but she took time aside to find something that matched the rest of her outfit. So, if anything, props to that. She's Electro, and Electro is pretty versatile. Her problem is her burst. It needs multiple enemies in order to be good. When it works, it's good. When it doesn't work, it's real bad. And you would 100% of the time rather run Fischl. As a main DPS, she's kind of underwhelming, but as a sub, that's going to be her main role. Electro Charged and Superconduct and Overloaded all got buffs. So if you're using her with EM, then you can do a decent amount of damage, right? But for Overloaded, you're gonna have to play Readjustment, obviously, same as Diluc. And it's gonna be okay. You're gonna like it as long as there are multiple enemies. So honestly, I think that lands her an A. She's pretty good. Chongyun, the Ghost Boy. Cryo needs a buff. It's gonna happen soon. I know that for a fact. And by fact, I mean it's in my gut. Chongyun is fun to play, that's for damn sure. His skill throws a little soul circle on the ground, and your main characters can be infused with cryo, which is pretty fun. The multiplier is not that great, but if you melt it, it could do some damage. His burst, he can do a lot of damage with his burst, especially if it melts. And if you have him C6, there's an extra shot tacked right on top of it. And I've been playing him a lot more recently. I think he's a cool character. I want to see what he can work with. And so far, Mono Cryo works okay with Shenhe and Kazuha. It does a decent amount of damage. Not the best, right? He's definitely not the best Cryo DPS, but it does a good amount of damage and it clears some stuff. But if you add him as a melt support, quick swap, burst DPS, he'll get a little funky. And we like funk. And you can build him for a decent amount of damage too, because by virtue of being cryo, you can put him on Blizzard, get your 40% crit, and focus on crit damage for really the rest of the artifacts. I think people are sleeping on him. We're gonna go A. Xinyan. You can play Xinyan physical or burst DPS. She's a Claymore. They have higher multipliers. You could do plunge, you could do overloaded. None of them are really good, and she has many replacements. You can build her as a shielder, underwhelming. Most of this community are mashers, right? We just want to beat the shit out of something. Quick, fast-paced battles, slice some stuff up. So shielding never really makes it to the top of people's priority list. All right, so by virtue of that, she's even less impressive. D, sorry. Itto! I think Itto has the best personality in the game. For sure. You know when his dialogue pops up that it kind of takes you out of the game for a second because he's the only character that's super intentionally silly. Unless I'm missing somebody. Nah, most of the others are very serious. Fenty's kind of fun and light, but he's not like silly. He's just kind of dumb. But Itto's numbers aren't that great. If you get his constellations, he gets a little better, especially C6. I can't wait to get a C6 Itto, because he can just swipe his entire burst duration. If you get lucky, there's some RNG involved in that. But it's super cool. You build him right, his damage can be pretty high. And he has a new support with the leopard lady, Shalonen. But unfortunately that involves constellations. And without them, sort of underwhelming. Fun, but underwhelming. Fun doesn't, unfortunately, play as big a role as underwhelming does. So he's going to be our first C, which I hate, but it's the truth. Eula! Eula is interesting. I think she's probably going to be one of the best characters in the game once physical gets a buff, and I know that's coming soon. That's going to be a Shneznaya thing. for sure. The last thing that needs some love is Superconduct, which buffs physical, therefore physical as well. Right? We need both of those, and then everything would be pretty well rounded. But as of now, the numbers are still pretty high for Eula. The problem is you have to attack so many times for her to actually deal a decent amount of damage, and you can never max them out. So the way it works is that you trigger her burst, and she has 7 seconds to attack as many times as possible to charge up the Light Fall Sword. She caps out at 30 hits. Good luck getting 30 hits. You can build her for attack speed, you can throw attack speed bonuses on there, and you'll get in the mid 20s maybe, but even that's kind of a stretch. Right? But you're probably going to see a couple 100,000 damage. It's going to be cool. It's going to be a nice snapshot. And I've seen obviously 1 million to 2 million on clips versus Scaramouche, but high investment for that. So she does decent damage, but besides the fact that she's a hot little dancer, she's going to be with Itto. Dehya's funny. Her skill gives resistance to interruption, which is pretty good, and has been increasingly good with the amount of squishy DPSs that have been coming out. Her burst does near negligible damage. It's never really recommended to use unless you're using her as a DPS, which isn't really worth using until she's C6. Every once in a while during her skill, she applies Pyro, so she can be a Burgeon trigger, right? She could be a support for an overloaded team. So she has use cases. Now, before, when she first came out, she was hot garbage. But it's funny to see that when she first came out, she started in D. A couple patches later, she moved up to C. And now, being honest, I don't even think she's B. I think she's actually A. She has a good amount of use cases, right? If only to support the squishy DPSs, that would be good enough. But she has other use cases that are pretty viable. Navia is sick. She has an umbrella that doubles as a fucking cannon. Are you kidding? Sick. The cooldown's pretty low. You get 2 of them. And when she first came out, I got her, and I think it was the biggest number on screen that I had seen on my account at the time, which is awesome. Everyone likes to see big numbers. Right? She charges up to 6 bullets as she absorbs crystallized. And then once they're maxed out, blow that sucker up. You can get like 300k. Pretty cool. Shalonen's release also supports her, so that's good. She's bumped up. She was the first attempt at making Geo good without actually making the element Geo good. She's not really a Geo character. She doesn't follow the trope. She doesn't scale with defense. She doesn't really have anything to do with shielding or crystallizes other than the fact that she absorbs crystals to make her shot stronger. Right? But the trope of Geo being mono, shielding, and scaling with defense, not there, but she kicks ass at it. It's gonna be S. First S. Noelle. I like Noelle. Noelle is quite possibly most people's first wished 4-star who have ever played this game, because she's on the beginner banner and guaranteed to get. And she's pretty good for early game, pretty good for mid game, and since the release of Farina, pretty dang good for end game. And yeah, there's going to be other options to play because there are other Geo Claymores, but she's the best one to use with Farina because she heals the whole party as she attacks. So you're building Farina stacks, and her burst lasts super long, and you can switch out of it, set up some shit, and then switch back into it and continue. So it's pretty good, but you have to build her with really good artifacts, and she has to be C6. And quite literally in no other use case are you going to be using her, especially for endgame. So with that being said, it's gonna be B. Dori. I have to test Dori more. She gets a lot of hate for good reason. She's not good, but I don't think she's as bad as people say she is. Because here's the thing, she's Electro, good in itself. She's a healer, can be used with Farina. Electro and Hydro, and Farina. That's Electro Charge. Just got a buff. Use her with a Dendro. Blooms, Hyper Blooms. Right? She gets Infusion at some point, and she could be the on-field driver for Hyper Blooms and possibly Overload, but not really. So I want to build her better and do some more testing, but as far as what I've seen so far, not very good, but not the worst. So I'm gonna say C. Fremenet, he's cool. It's a cool little emo boy with the seals and such. He's a little oyster boy. He's not very good. At C6, he's decent, but decent at physical really doesn't mean too much. I've seen him used as a melt trigger. You can get some pretty crazy melt numbers, which is fun to see, but they're hard to proc because his skill is so finicky, especially if you're a masher. Then good luck. But I'm waiting to get C6 so I could really test him out. I'm under the impression that what I have seen is true. So, it's gonna be D. Kaveh! Kinich! I love Kinich. I'm gonna get ahead of the ball. We're gonna throw him right up at S. He's awesome. He's so good. He's powerful. The reason I said Navia at the time I saw the highest numbers with was because after I got Kinich replaced. Kinich is a baller. He's a cool character. Ahau is a annoying little rascal, but the duo really works. He's great for exploration, especially in Alan. I use him on my farming team just to get around. It saves me a ton of time. He has a little bit of AoE, and it's decent enough, especially if you group them. You could hit 4 enemies at once if they're all close together, and you're hitting them all with like 200,000 damage. And so he's clearing quick. You don't need to build energy on him really, because at least I don't burst. It's generally useless because it applies such little dendro and does such little damage. People thought in the beginning that since it paused his skill duration, that it was good to weave in there. And yeah, you could do a little extra damage, but it's still spending time taking away from the supports that you set up right before him. Right? So even though his skill is prolonged, that second and a half for the animation, all the other supports that you set up, like maybe a Bennett circle or something like that second and a half is being taken away from them. So to me, it's just not worth it. But if you're burning, you get 4 or 5 shots in, 200,000 each, just about. He's clearing whatever you're throwing in front of him. He's awesome. Sayu. Sayu's been largely forgotten. I'm not sure I've heard that name. I almost forgot it. She's cute. She rolls around. She heals, right? If you build her full EM, you could do some fun swirl stuff, right? And her skill infuses with whatever element you swirl. So it's fun to get around. It's good for exploring. It could be a fresh play style for a team if you're looking to spice things up a little. But overall, it's just kind of a gimmick that would be interesting in the short run, and it would be very difficult to clear any sort of end game with her. But the fact that she heals does mean she can work with Farina in some capacity, and she is Animo, so she can swirl an element if you put VD on her. So by virtue of that, she's not useless, right? But are there better options? Yeah. That said, I don't think she's as useless as these guys, so we're gonna put her C. Bada bing, bada boom. That's it. Let's readjust. Yeah, this makes sense to me. Yeah, we're sticking with this. Kinich, best Claymore in the game. Sticking by that, dude. He's sick. Tell me your thoughts. Who should be higher? Who do you think should be higher? And who do you think should be D? Tell me that. All right, we're doing bows next. So I'll see you then. Ciao.